Hello, and welcome to another Autodesk Alias 2021 Deep Dive session. In this session, I'll be talking about new options in the Subdiv Extrude command. So let's get started. Subdiv Extrude allows you to extrude curves and now surfaces. So we can extrude trim edges, surface edges, and any degree of curve. And there's some new fitting and rebuild options to allow us to control the parameterization of the resulting sub-D. So let's try that out. So I'm just going to pick this curve, and this curve happens to be a NURBS curve. It's got quite a few spans and things. I'm not really sure what it was made from. The curve itself looks like this. It's got a bunch of vertices here. Yeah, doesn't really matter. It could be any kind of curve. It can have multi-knots, can have all kinds of things. Subdivision Extrude. And I'm going to grab this curve and just extrude it a little bit in the width. And we can see here that I'm extruding a curve or a surface edge. I've got 5 divisions, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And right now I'm uniformly spacing those 5 faces. And as I adjust the value, it'll just keep adding them in until you get the number that you like. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with maybe 5 or 6 for right now. So that's uniform distribution, okay? If we go to this next curve, which is the identical curve, okay, now we're the same, but I'm going to slide this slider up. Now what this is doing is they start uniformly spaced, and then the software looks at where there's higher rates of curvature in the input geometry, and it starts to bias the vertices towards that area. So that value goes from 0 to 1. 0 meaning curvature has no effect. It's going to be evenly spaced. And 1 means base everything on the curvature. Okay, so we can go up here and you can see how now it's kind of moved all of these vertices up here towards where there's more curvature. And what you'll kind of be able to see is we get this deviation and then we're over the top here. And then when we come up and look at this next one, now we get some evenly, a better approximation of that original input curve, okay? And one more extrusion up here, just to, try scaling that for a second. I want to show one last thing with this specific curve. If you take this curvature bias value and you move it all the way to 1, okay, in this case we get kind of a interesting looking solution. And in this type of curve, a curve that doesn't have any really sharp peak of curvature, a value of 1 doesn't really produce a good result. So oftentimes 0.95 is going to be the best value, okay, if you want curvature to influence it. But I'll show you specifically why we left the formula, or left the code in and left the mathematics in that supports a value of 1 for curvature bias, all right? And that's going to be over here on a couple of other small examples that I have. So if we look at these two guys, all right, and I wanted to make a subdivision out of this, okay? So I can extrude that guy, and if we come back to a value of 0.95, we get really good distribution, okay? So if I go all the way to 1, I don't get good distribution. And then if we come over here and we look at this curve and we do an extrusion, and I make this a value of 1, it actually does work because it's taking more into account that this curve has a lot of shape right here. So if I delete that sub-D and we just look at the curve, that curve has kind of a spike point right here in curvature that's a lot different than the rest. So in that case, that's a good use case for us to have the value of 1 be able to be put in. A value of 0.95 would have been here. It's just not quite as nice as this 1 value works in this specific data case, okay? Next we have a front fender here. And this front fender, this is how we can now work with NURBS geometry. And I'm just going to kill that Subd over there. F key, Subd workflow, predefined hotkey, matches Maya. All right. So Subdivision Extrude. Now these are surface edges, right? So I could pick these surface edges. These are trimmed surface edges, okay? And now we could come off of this guy. I'm just going to look over here a little bit, maybe move this down. I'm just trying to get a decent approximation. We can come back and try to get continuity and things like that with this later. I'm not really worried about that at this point. I'm just trying to show you how we can now extrude a subdiv off of surface edges, whether they're trimmed or not. And now if we look at some of our options in here, if we use parametric, we can get this solution. And if we use uniform, we get that solution. And if we add in some curvature, we get this solution. All fairly similar, but you do get still the chance to customize those, tune it in till it gets to be looking how you want it. Now see, if I go this way, I have a little bit more, I can see a little more deviation. I'm a little under here and a little over here. As I slide this into curvature bias, I'm getting a little bit better fit, I believe, along that edge specifically, okay? And then the last example I would like to show is on a door over here. So this has quite a bit of curvature and it's not planar, right? It's in 3 dimensions. So we're just going to use the Subdiv Extrude. I'm going to grab these edges and extrude it forward. And again, here you can kind of see with our curvature, we get a very good match. If I only go to 0.95, I don't get quite as good a match. If I go to right up to 1, and then we look along that edge, I get a lot better fit, okay? But it's gonna be a balance for users to find what's a good CV distribution for this Subd and what matches back to the original input data. So there's just options in here to allow you to have some pretty good control over how we fit an extrusion from a surface edge. Okay, one thing I want to draw your attention to. If I have the controls on for this subdiv, okay, and I come into extrude, and I have this set to curve and surface edges, and I box select this, I just picked every surface edge on the screen to make an extrusion from. So when I extrude this, it's picked all the limit surface edges. So I'm going to make a Subd that looks like that. Okay? Not really what I want, because what I've now created is this. Right? So in the case, if you want to make another subdiv off of that edge, you need to go to Subdiv Edges. And then we can pick this subdiv edge, shift middle mouse button, and then we can begin to do our extrusions and start bending this new surface into shape. So just be sure that if you're wanting to extrude a subdiv, you have the subdiv edges selected, and if you want to curve a surface, switch that out. That's all for the new Extrude. A lot of options that allow you to mix and match with NURBS geometry to build Subds. We'll catch you in the next video.